What is one of your favorite opening works of fiction?
Well, what I did was I brought the openings of 3 works of fiction, and I'm going to show you sort of different ways that a story can begin and be effective. The first opening is from the Mona Simpson story, Lawns. It was published in, I believe, first in 1984 in the Iowa Review, and then it was reprinted in Best American Short Stories in 1986. And in this opening, we have access to the narrator's thoughts, and the narrator's thoughts are important. She is speaking to the reader. We're getting some kind of psychological portrait of her. We're learning about the condition that she is generally in at the moment. So here's the opening. I steal. I've stolen books and money and even letters. Letters are great. I can't tell you the feeling walking down the street with $20 in my purse, stolen earrings in my pocket. I don't get caught. That's the amazing thing. You're out on the sidewalk, other people all around, shopping, walking, and you've got it. You're out of the store, you've done this thing you're not supposed to do, but no one stops you. At first it's like a rush. It's like you're even for everything you didn't get before, but then you're left alone. No one even notices you. Nothing changes. So here is sort of introducing a character, the interior of a character, and then some kind of problem that she's facing, which is she's doing something that is dangerous and transgressive, and she knows on some level that it's wrong, but she is motivated, as you sort of see by the way she thinks. And so we as the reader are beginning to think, well, what's going to happen to her? Is she going to keep stealing? Are things going to get worse? We take what she's saying almost to be a confession. And so this kind of access to a character's inner life it can be a great way to start a short story. Here's a different short story. This is from The Killers by Ernest Hemingway. And I'm just going to read you the first 2 sentences. But here we don't have any access to the character's thoughts at all. Everything is external. So it's almost as if there's a camera that's looking down on the scene and presenting information to the reader. So it's a very simple 2 sentences, but as is usually the case with Hemingway, he only gives you a limited amount of description, but what he gives you is usually significant. So the story starts off with 17 simple words. The door of Henry's lunchroom opened and 2 men came in. They sat down at the counter. That's dramatized action. That is putting a story into motion through what people do. So you have Henry's lunchroom. It's named. It's not just a lunchroom. It's Henry's lunchroom. It opens and 2 men come in. 2 men are described as strangers. It's not Joe and Jim didn't come in. It's 2 men came in. So you have a specific lunchroom, and then you have general visitors. And then they sat down at the counter means something is going to happen with the presentation of, something's going to happen over lunch. And that's what does happen. And Hemingway, after a few lines of dialogue, goes on to describe one of the men. He says, he wore a derby hat and a black overcoat buttoned across the chest. His face was small and white, and he had tight lips. He wore a silk muffler and gloves. Well, who sits down to eat something at 5 p.m, wearing a hat, wearing a buttoned overcoat, and wearing a muffler and gloves? The story is called The Killers. So the writer, Hemingway, is getting us to ask questions. Are these the killers? If so, who are they there to kill? What's their motivation for being there? Who sent them? Like, again, a strong opening sort of persuades the reader that it would be in the reader's best interest to keep reading because you'll be paid off nicely for it. Do we have time to do one more?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the last story that I would like to sort of show the opening of is a story that begins with dialogue. So you have inner thought for the first opening, you have dramatic action for the second opening, and you have dialogue for the third opening. So this is Lori Moore's story, FaceTime. It was published in the New Yorker a couple years ago, and it was reprinted in the 2022 O. Henry Prize Stories, which is what I'm reading from at the moment. I asked my father if he knew where he was, and he said, kind of. You are in the hospital. Your hip surgery went well, but there is a virus, and you have been found to have it. You are contagious. No one can get near. It's happening all over the world. You caught it in your assisted living facility. The chef had it. Entirely through dialogue, except for the first few words of the first sentence. So we're just being given a lot of clear information. You were asking earlier, can the writer overdo it with description at the beginning, too many names, too many facts, too much information? Yes. And so what she does here is she slows it down with short sentences, and she sort of, gives us the conditions that this story is beginning with. I mean, I asked my father if he knew where he was. Just that alone is it provokes thought. It even provokes sympathy, because if he's demented, we're going to start feeling both for him and for her. And then the answer to the question is kind of. Well, what does that mean? Do you kind of know where you are? Like, to what extent do you know where you are, and to what extent do you not? And so the daughter says, you are in the hospital. Well, if you have to tell someone that he's in a hospital, that tells you a lot about the mental condition that the person is. Your hip surgery went well. This tells you that the person is older. Well, not necessarily, but it's usually older people who have hip fractures and require hip surgery. So again, Lori Moore is not explaining all this. She's showing it through, good use of dialogue. But there is a virus, and you have been found to have it. Well, all of us who lived through this period know exactly what virus we're talking about, and the kind of circumstances that the father would be in. You are contagious. No one can get near. So here you are in the hospital. You can't go to the place you're living because you caught the virus there, and now you can't go back. You're going to have to wait until you get a negative. It's happening all over the world. So the father doesn't understand what's going on with him personally, nor does he understand what's going on in the world at large. And I mean, this story is sort of, it's really delivering painful truths about what it's like to be in contact with a loved one, a dear loved one, during a time of his compromised mental activity. And again, the writer is not explaining it. The writer is just using dialogue to show what's going on.
And you said here short sentences, and
Yeah.
it seems like too, not overly long, overly flowery wording, and,
Right.
and it really helps you kind of dig into what's going on, because
Yeah.
you're not sure, you're like following it along, but it's not. It's. Do you notice that with newer writers that they tend to use sort of big words, and it takes you out of the story?
Sometimes you do see that, like unnecessarily big words or unnecessarily flowery language. Don't get me wrong, though. I do love many writers who write not in this way, and Lori Moore writes all kinds of sentences of all kinds of lengths and rhythms and sounds and so on. I was just saying, like, as a way of introducing information, if you sort of do it in short sentences where, first of all, the reader can digest what's going on, but also the father might only be able to understand a few words at a time. So she's almost explaining it so that someone who's as mentally compromised as he is might be able to understand it as well.